Well, we can go ahead and get started. Um, Glad that everyone is able to join in. We are going to talk about chapter 22, which is the demographics, demographic foundations of an African American nation within a nation. So, first question that I have for us is, why is nationhood important for us? Um, I thought of this question because as I'm reading the first section, when Amos talks about the sense of a nation and breaks down the components of what makes a nation and the impact of it, um, I was really I liked his analogy of the nervous system. When you have infrastructures such as, bridges, communications, um, finance institutions, as all of these things are being built, it creates a nervous system, or a muscle, a boss, a brain that kind of just operates the country itself, and it responds to, what the people need, what the land needs. Like, if we use Liberia for an example, how it is built, it's on this coast. So, in order to advocate that, or what we can capitalize off of it being off the coast, seaports, um, it having tropical rainforests, you know, that could be tourism, or ways to, integrate farming. And for me to answer for my answer of why it's important, it's important because there's analogies that we used, right? Halapi brought up, like, the house mentality of having your own house and establishing rules. We use sports where, you are in unison, everybody's unified. It could be used as a family where you're with a group of people that share same values, whether it's beliefs, whether it's a language, whether it's ethnicity, and we're working together to make what we have a better place. Now, the unfortunate part for our people here in America is, instead of it having this nationhood mindset, it's more so of integrating, and they want to work within what's already existed.
Me, it's the us having a nation is the epitome of self determination, and I think it's the key to longevity for our people because what's happening here um, is in many other nations where we're not the dominant uh, group is, I think, if not slowly, it's a whittling away.
Hmm.
It's yeah, it's destruction. Ultimately, it's destruction for our folks.
Yeah.
Culture, everything. So having something where we determine from top to bottom what happens is key. Then ultimately if that gets messed up, then it's like, okay, then that's just how it is. You give it a true try, and you can't say anything more that then you really did make an effort. But if you're not even going for that, um, that it to me it's us surviving,
Right.
us truly surviving, not just like a cockroach.
Right.
Where you kind of make it at the bottom everywhere, and they're not interested in the bottom. It's us progressing on every level.
Yeah, and I think for me, in terms of looking at nationhood, I think of being included in the decision making process, being at the table where decisions are being made that impact our community.
I was saying that the reason why we need a nation is so we can stop producing Leslie Bethels.
Oh my goodness.
Because that's not just a one off. That mentality is prevalent.
Hmm.
How do you
You
have
know,
the energy?
people think that you know, a person like that is just an outlier, but they're not.
Hmm.
That mentality is prevalent. People actually think that Barack Obama had power.
Yeah.
They actually think that Megan Thee Stallion is a strong um, black woman.
Influence, yeah,
You
for
know, it's
black
like these
for black
these people actually believe this shit. It's not a joke. And the only way it's going to change is if we have W's in the win column,
Yep.
because that's all they respect. They just respect what you do. Like if you can produce something tangible and concrete, then fine. And actually, I don't blame them
Mhm.
because there's been a lot of bullshit artists talking a whole lot of shit and not doing nothing.
Yep.
So once you can produce something and put your name on it and put your stamp on it and say, "Yo, this is what we did," you get a lot more respect because kids, our youth, have been used to seeing people talking a whole lot of shit and doing absolutely nothing.
Hmm.
So when they hear people say, "Oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that," they automatically think of all the people that didn't do the shit that they said they was gonna do.
Yeah.
So W's. That's all it takes. All it takes is W's.
Question number two. Um, what is what was Amos Wilson explaining when he was talking about the power of a black consumer? Um, my my thoughts on that was pretty much just we we spend a lot and have a we have a huge amount of spending power. I mean, now, because at first, well, from the book, it said, more than 250 to 300 billion, but I'm sure we're in the trillions now. And I think what Amos is just saying is that, we just have to shift that into, a platform that is contributing, and worth something, to invest in. And we could go back to, when we talk about, how a lot of us are willing to donate, for change, for a positive cause. And the money that's going towards these organizations, they don't have, anything tangible. There's nothing really set. It's just, a semi done proposal of, we're about to do this, but, we got to get these things into play, or just an idea to float around and, get into people's pockets. So, like, to have, a legit institution, a base, an agenda of where the money's going to, that puts a lot of things at ease, because, people are aware of it.
Shifting that as a collective. Um, I think just like when people talk about medical care and going to um, uh, you know system where we could save money because we as a collective are contributing, and it would drive prices down. So for us, I think in the main areas of housing, food, transportation, that would be an enormous. Just that alone, even if we were still here, um, making that change and working with each other in much greater numbers. that would make a huge impact for our people. But for us, for the future, for long term, um, I definitely so black consumer, the power of the black consumer is everything. We are establishing. We're not just doing things right now. We're establishing for the future, working with each other. In the recent earlier chapters,
Mm-hmm.
or recent previous chapters, excuse me, that we're talking about businesses and how us establishing jobs,
Yeah.
our neighborhoods having control over our surroundings, and getting the quote unquote aliens to work for us. Uh, it's the power of the black consumer. It's everything. It's everything for us to move forward. We work with each other much more so than now. We harness whatever money we can within the community. And we can, and that power also means we can dictate terms when dealing with quote unquote aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not simply them setting up shop and doing whatever they want to do.
You know what it's always felt like for me? Imagine if you had a family, right? You had the mother and the father,
Mm-hmm.
and you have like some preschool kids,
Mm-hmm.
and the mother and the father leave the family and leave the house to the kids.
Mm.
That's what it feels like. There's nobody manning our collective culture ship,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And so the kids are trying to figure out how to do shit and make shit work when we don't have the experience, the life experience, the knowledge, or any of that stuff to do what we have to do. But we trying because, we want to see the house in better shape.
Yeah.
And that's how it is. It's like the people that's supposed to be the parents, which is our leaders, our representatives, have abandoned ship.
We can start off with question number one: why urban blight should be addressed when establishing a nation within a nation. And I think it's very important because I never heard of the term urban blight, but when I've read the definition and like the examples that it explains,
Hmm.
I definitely could understand because here in Atlanta, like there's definitely a deterioration in certain areas in urban cities in here in the A. Like I do see a lot of vacant buildings. There's definitely streets that have like a lot of potholes, and even from the economic side, there's lack of resources for possibly infrastructure or healthcare, and there's not much of a push to like revamp the city itself or bring more opportunities in that specific area. And it's just basically a neglect where a city's being neglected, physically with its buildings that has been built over time, and it's deteriorating. And then also from a social aspect to where the needs of the people aren't being met, and even the people as well are not taking care of the environment. Like this boils down to when you go into transportation, and it's a lot of littering, a lot of trash on the floor or on the tracks, and it smells like. It goes to the smallest minute details when talking about urban blight.
Kind of shift the focus away from, you know, the real study and the real reasons why there's quote unquote urban blight, or the the destruction of the central cities and why things are so bad. They come up with the terms like that, and it kind of shifts the focus away from the intentionality of it. I mean, if there are people who are poor and they're living in an area, they don't own the apartment buildings. The landlords let the apartment buildings
Hmm.
deteriorate. Now,
Mm,
not that there aren't people who also destroy things. I'm not talking about that. That
right.
no question, but that's everywhere. So you don't hear suburban blight when they're talking, when you have somebody who's destroying their own home constantly. There's no term put on it like that. You could say the individual is trifling, but I mean, you don't have that stereotype
Mm-hmm.
of the entire area, suburban blight. But yeah, if the landlord lets things go downhill, and what can a poor person? They're just trying to survive. And Ethel, I think you made that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like this is you will put so much on a person who's literally just trying to survive.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
So we
And I think it's,
definitely seen it.
yeah, yeah, and just like you said, Helena, it is intentional because my experience was when I had left my parents' home, I moved to East Harlem in
Hmm.
Manhattan. I go to Brooklyn night, so
Hmm.
and at that time I had brought an apartment, and the thing was East Harlem was Spanish Harlem. At that time, a lot of blacks and Hispanic lived in the neighborhood.
Hmm.
But
Mm.
then as time went by, I noticed that a lot of the abandoned buildings and lots were being brought by Jewish people.
Hmm.
Mm.
And over the course of, let me see, 15 years, when I first moved into my building, there was 36 units. It was primarily Black and Hispanic. And when I left in 2015, when I went to a board meeting, I was the only Black person there.
Wow.
I
Wow.
left
Wow.
people, and of course, this is the way where you get people out because the apartments are going for such and such a price,
Yes.
and then the
Yes.
Black people they can't afford to buy them. So in
Right.
some neighborhoods, the whites they're looking to buy property, they can't afford certain properties in certain more high prestigious neighborhoods, so then they will buy into East Harlem. So now that's how I've started seeing to how East Harlem, which is primarily our barrio, Spanish Harlem, turned totally
Hmm.
mostly whites, very
Mm.
few blacks, very few Hispanic in that area because they got price started getting priced out.
Yeah, I was born in Washington D.C. and over the years, I mean, there were definitely issues. I mean, there were a lot of areas that were just run down, and I think a good example of when we're talking about this urban blight is that it depends on what street you're on and who's there, whether something like a road repaving will happen. And
Mm.
it's a joke that's around, around the DC area that you start seeing if you start seeing like certain stores like a Whole Foods, a Trader Joe's pop up, a Starbucks pop up in the neighborhood. You
Right.
start seeing bike trails, and some of the old areas that I lived in, I laugh because I'm like, I do not recognize this. There was
Mm.
a corner store that was there for years I
Mm.
used to go to. And I mean, I look and it's like like a little pit, it's all, everything's pulled out of it or whatever, and it looks, and you see things that are being built up around the area, and the attention that the government gives to a particular area, uh it kind of depends on who's there. And
Right.
you could your same tax dollars are going to that same government, but they don't serve you.
Right.
So that's why I think it's always good when we hear certain terms and it's addressed to us to kind of dig in a little bit, because there no question there are people who don't do the right thing. And it's not taking away personal responsibility from anybody. But if you have a government who's actively systematically not taking care of the needs of the community, there ain't but so much that an individual can do.
Yep.
um and at some point it's like, okay, you stop redirecting the blame, we put it right there on you. Are you doing what you're supposed to do if you're a government official or you're working in a government? And you can look at the community, say something like paving roads or having
Mm-hmm.
those little safety poles or whatever they're sticking up all
Mhm.
over the place. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, all the changes, and DC is known for a lot of one-way streets and just things that are changed. There was one street that completely changed. It used to be near my bank, changed from a two-way street to a one-way street. And I'm sure it was because those residents there wanted it that way. I
Mm,
was like, okay, and again, you get together and you say, this is what we want. Cool, fine. But the thing is that you have people who, I mean, the majority of the DC used to be Chocolate City, who were there for, I mean, decades. And we had all kinds of, middle class. You had wealthy folks, you had poor folks, obviously, but people thriving.
right.
And the services aren't there. Come on, like they should be for
Yep.
everybody.
The thing that really caught me the most, and honestly, I've been stuck on this question, was the quote or was the saying that Dr. Amos Wilson had mentioned in page 552. And I thought this is something that we could discuss because I couldn't think of any question but just the quote itself. He said, the African American community, given its current disposition, is in need of new categories of self representation, of a new representation of the world. If it is to change for the better, to realize its potential to achieve liberation, then it must change the perception of reality it has received from its exploiters. It must name the unnamed. And that's what really had me stuck because I'm thinking, how do you name the unnamed? What does that look like? What is the new representation? And for days, I don't know. I'm in the cloud with this one. I
Mm.
gotta be honest. I'm in the cloud.
I like that part. He kind of touched on that in some of the previous chapters too, and it's basically us defining us.
Right,
It doesn't matter what somebody else says. To me, whether positive or negative. If it's positive, that's wonderful. If it's negative, whatever.
right,
But even if it's positive and all of a sudden they decide to turn negative, um, we just keep on rolling because we're defining ourselves.
right.
So I like that part of it also.
Can I ask y'all what do you think he means by that? Because I have my thoughts on it, but I wanted to see what y'all thought.
Well, I thought it was a self determination, us defining our reality, how we move forward, us that we are the center. We're not looking for somebody else to define how we should behave, who we are and what we should do. That's how I looked at it.
So that's what did he say exactly? We have to name the unnameable. Is that what he said?
Yeah, it must
It
you must
must
Name
name the
name the unnamed.
the unnamed.
Must
if
name
it
the
is to
unnamed.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, if the African American community, given its current disposition, is in need of new categories of self representation, of a new representation of the world. If it is to change for the better, to realize its potential, to achieve liberation, then it must change the perception of reality it has received from its exploiters. It must name the unnamed. By changing its self perception from that of perceiving itself as a sheer conglomeration or aggregation of self centered individuals, united only by their common misery. And I've heard you say this, Hollop, victimization and skin color, to that of a nation united by an African centered consciousness and identity.
Right. Yeah, I have
So,
said it in a different way,
yeah, yeah, by the
but I
by
said basically the
aesthetics.
same thing. Yeah, I said
Hmm.
we're a scattered group of individualists aligned by aesthetic similarities.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like from what I'm thinking that he was saying, name the unnamed. I guess just redefining what being African is, or just redefining the culture itself. Because let's say for your take on it, right? How with the scattered individuals, I think for them, unconsciously or consciously, they're trying to name the unnamed by just thinking like, okay, if I'm wearing, the colors of red, black, and green, then I'm naming the unnamed of being African. Or if I'm, growing out locks or something, then that's African. But it's I think people are looking at it from a visual instead of just the details or what what culture actually is, because it's not just the fashion, the entertainment, the music. It's the way you think, it's the way you carry yourself. And I think that's what part of naming the unnamed is how do we how do we redefine what we do and what is our purpose, the agenda, and like how are we carrying ourselves going forward. Maybe that's what he was talking about, but still I'm still kind of lost in that question of
Mm.
what's the new representation, how do we even go about that.
Well, I think you're giving people a lot more credit than they deserve because I don't think they're even thinking about naming the unnamed. Like, I don't think that's even on their mind. But
Mhm.
Ethel, what is your thought?
On my note, I just wrote like look developing a new mindset that does not identify with the European center way of thinking.
Mhm.
Looking more at um what's the word I'm thinking about? Looking at really eliminating everything that has been taught to you and just coming up with
Mm,
your own ideas collectively. And it's going to
mm.
be different for everybody in the same, ethnic group, but you have to just really start saying what we were taught, what our ancestors were taught was wrong and it doesn't really apply to us. So that's going to take a whole different shift of saying everything that we were taught is wrong, and you got to kind of go into it with a more new open mind and kind of explore what are we to become.
I like that point because I would say it refers to me personally when from the age of 20 to now. Once
Mhm.
I once I came into college and came across a professor where, you know, he's saying, although I'm teaching you this stuff, the first thing I want you to do is just think. And it sounds cliche and it sounds simple, but then I'm like, he's got a point.
Mhm.
The things that were raised or groomed into,
Mhm.
why is that? Why did I get into it? Did I choose it? Not necessarily. I mean, it could have been influence. It could have been by choice because of my parents or so. Like, why did I have to? How did I get here the way I got here? And
Yeah.
then from there, it's like a snake slowly peeling off old skin.
Mhm.
And I don't feel it or I don't notice it, but I don't know, it just happens. And it's like I'm slowly taking in what is useful, but then whatever doesn't sound right or just isn't right, period, through research and stuff. It's like, well, then, I just throw that away. And I don't know, it's a whole different way of rewiring. And now you're like, what should I need to focus on what is right and beneficial for me. So I think that's a great point that you made, Ethel, because when you literally start to brainwash or unlearn things,
Yeah.
a lot of stuff just doesn't seem to matter, and you're only focusing on what really matters.
Right, because I think you start to realize you've been programmed.
Right,
You have to be conscious that all of this is intentional to program you not to think.
right.
And when you start to say, okay, let me throw away everything that I was taught. So now I'm more open to what is more in alignment with how we can operate as a as a nation, as a people together.
Right. And I think, that's another thing too. Like when it comes to unlearning stuff like that it takes work. It cuz you're figuring out, okay, this is where I am. We're at the bottom, or it's kind of like starting over from scratch in a way. Like, okay, this is where I am, and let me see how far I need to climb, sort of thing. Or what's the new path that I should be taking? And then just going forward, it's like, okay, cool. But some people are comfortable being stuck in that way. Like, it kind of reminds me of that scene from Hustle and Flow where the white lady's like, sometimes I don't mind being messed around with. Just don't, play me too much. It's like some people are literally fine having their minds played with. It's like it's comfortable for them because they're
Just gonna
ignoring
say that.
they're ignoring what they, should be actually focusing on, and they're thinking something abstract is going to take care of it, or it's in the scripture, yada yada yada, and they'll just go about their life without thinking there's no consequences that come with it. But once you actually start to look in the details and really ask questions, then you'll realize like, oh shoot, like this is deeper than I thought.
I think it's important to remember also that it's on purpose that there's a comfort there. That it's been not conspiratorial. It's been manufactured that way.
Yep.
Have us have a certain comfort level with being oppressed,
Yep.
um, and having things done to us, going through a cycle, and and just right back to square one. Um, and you're supposed to be comfortable with it. It's folks have worked hard to make it that way.
Yep.
And also to not do too much critical thinking. I was just thinking of
Mm,
when I was a kid in say elementary school, junior high school. I mean, things were different. There was more, even though there was a lot, obviously, of the routine garbage against our people in the media,
mm-hmm.
and the things that were done to keep us in our place. Whether it's on talk shows, how we were talked about, who was allowed on talk shows,
Mm-hmm.
the topics of the talk shows, everything in the mainstream was still designed, for us to be able to only get reach a certain level, and to be able to think of things in public,
Right.
discuss things
Right.
to a certain extent. But it's even less so now as far as critical thinking. It's like a clown show so often. You do have a sprinkling here and there, but as far as the norm of discussing topics, it's ridiculous. What's out there and what you're supposed to be thinking about. It's nothing really that benefits our people.
Yeah.
And us moving forward as a group. It's the individualism that's still focused on, or being an American.
Mm,
Um, and it's not what's the best for um, Black folks, African Americans, African people. That's not that's not in the cards a lot of times when they have these discussions about what's going on in the world. You have to look for it. And it should
yeah.
be the norm for our people, but you have to look for it. When we have our public, about Prince George's County and in the DC area, when you look at the public stations, used to be Howard University uh, public TV station, and you look on there, and it's Maryland Public TV kind of is taking over that. So there are things on there. It's like, huh? It's a majority black, you know. Uh, there's still, at least in the county, but in
Mm-hmm.
the DC area, there's still a significant number of black folks as a whole.
Yeah.
And it doesn't serve, you know, us as it should for a whole station, for one station. There should be at least one station. It's not BET, it's not TV1. It should be a public TV station to address our community. And they'll have a show here and there, but as far as filling up the 24 hours, it's just like a regular PBS thing. So long story short is that what's out there doesn't encourage us to have discussions, real deep discussions with each other
Mm-hmm.
about what we need to do to progress.
Mm-hmm.
It's always somebody else in the mix. It seems like if that's the case, also, if it's something in the mainstream, how can we all get along? Um, let's have a discussion or let's have a conversation, that kind of stuff. It's
Right.
like there's no nuts and bolts of what we need to do. And for us, it should be, working towards nationhood.
Holla up any thoughts from the page 552, naming the unnamed.
Yeah, as y'all were talking, I was thinking about what attracted me to the slave theater.
Mm,
And if you grew up in a Christian or religious household, or the way that we're taught is through indoctrination. It's like every time you come across a group, an organization, they're trying to recruit you,
Mm,
and they telling you be down with us. Da, 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 da. What attracted me to the slave was that it wasn't about the people on the stage; it was about the people in the audience.
mm,
You can go there on every Wednesday and hear a different point of view, all from an African centered perspective,
mm,
but different groups, different things. So it's like we weren't treated like we were followers. We were treated like we were students.
mhm,
mm,
mhm,
And that attracted me because what it does is if you take position in life as a student, then you'll learn and you'll learn from many teachers.
mhm,
You're not so dogmatic in the way that you look at the world. So that's what attracted me to that. And ever since then, and what Amos Wilson said is so funny. This is why I just feel that he's brilliant. Is that he's describing the situation that we're in right now.
mm,
Um, the '90s to me was university. '80s, '90s was university. 2000s was graduation. Like I don't want to hear. We should not be talking anymore about the problem. Our mindset should be solution oriented.
mhm,
right.
And that's what he's saying, name the unnamed. Our solution to a certain problem hasn't even been defined yet. Why? Because we're not even in the mindset of solution thinking.
mm,
That's why I said the woke, this whole woke movement, where it's this over concentration on race in America.
mhm,
I really literally feel like they're the Washington Generals and the white people are the Harlem Globetrotters. That's how it feels.
mm,
It
I
feels
think
like they're there to lose. They're there to
yeah.
lose. They're there to break the spirit of black people and to let black people know, oh, this is some bullshit. What
mm,
you need to do is get down with this American thing.
What
Pick
you need
yourself
to
up
do
by
is
your
get
bootstraps and make some money and all this right wing Republican bullshit.
mm,
And the reason why they can get away with it is because of the woke movement. Because what do they stand for? Are they telling our people that we need to embrace our nation state of Liberia? Nope. Are they telling us that we need to pour our concentration into establishing our own socioeconomic and political context? Nope. They tearing down statues and protesting over old Golden Girls episodes. And a thinking black person goes, this is some bullshit.
mm,
I don't think
And what's
I
the
mean,
alternative?
they're not even doing that anymore. They're not doing anything.
Yeah, they're not doing nothing now. But
Like,
what's the alternative to the thinking black person? What's the alternative?
mm.
If they don't know about us, because we're small, we don't have a big microphone. Not a lot of people know who we are. So where's their alternate form of cultural consciousness that they can go to?
the focus is staying right here. Except I
Yeah,
guess
and
maybe
being and
Umar. Yes.
complaining about white people and complaining about oppression, and we can't do this because of that, and da da da. And in the meantime, the world is going on, technology is advancing, And we're still sitting up here playing this white people game.
Yep.
Mm.
Other people are saying, how could we use this technology to help benefit us in the future?
Mm.
That's what he's talking about, naming the unnamed. There's things that we have to do as a people that we're not even in a position to do because we still have this old, antiquated mindset.
Mm.
People are redefining paradigms and stuff right now as we talk. Bitcoin is a paradigm shift.
Shift.
That's just one. AI is a paradigm shift. And it's going to cause multiple paradigm shifts. And we're going to sit up here and argue about stuff from hundreds of years ago?
Mm.
Amos Wilson used to read newspapers every morning, like multiple newspapers every morning.
Mm.
Why? Because he wanted to see what the hell was going on in the world today. Because that's going to determine how you're going to move and operate in the future.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying get rid of history. I'm not saying any of that because we need to learn our history. We need to have that strong foundation. But what I'm saying is the people that have already learned this shit, what are we fucking still talking about?
That's a
So
learning
that's what I
process.
think he means. That's what I think he means by naming the unnamed. It's like there are solutions to problems that we have right now that have not been solved yet. How do we solve them?